Set aside everything you believed about the Second World War. Picture nearly 100 years of film reels collecting dust in the most classified archives, suddenly unveiling a surprising, almost stunning revelation in a sterile, seemingly frozen moment. Within an archival research facility on Berlin's outskirts, a team of committed scholars whose existence has been dedicated to history's most intricate details hunches over a gleaming monochrome display. The film material dates back nearly 9 decades. These recordings were captured during a dangerous and disturbing era, when Nazi Germany was beginning to flex its muscles like a hunting beast, preparing to construct an unprecedented and formidable naval force. Before continuing, please engage with this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything to us. Appearing on the monitor like spirits from forgotten times, ceremonial announcement cards materialize in Gothic lettering, proclaiming the magnificent occasion of blessing one of Hitler's most powerful warships. Germany witnesses a gathering of hundreds, possibly thousands, of individuals positioned on the wharf, their arms extended in that eerily recognizable, spine-chilling Nazi gesture, as though they were a unified entity driven by shared purpose. Within this enormous ocean of raised limbs, the trained eye of Dr. Hannah Vogt, senior archivist, a woman whose historical instincts have been refined through decades of meticulous examination, detects something extraordinary, something that disrupts the generally intimidating uniformity. Narrowing her focus, she requests her colleague operating the digital conversion program to magnify the picture. The display intensifies, concentrating on a dense assembly of civilians. Hundreds, if not thousands of faces celebrating the vessel's launch, nearly all extending their right arms in that rigid, almost mechanical Nazi salute. Then, within this terrifying conformity, a single individual emerges distinctly. He remains stationary with his arms firmly folded across his torso like a stubborn boulder in a turbulent sea. Initially, his outline appears fuzzy, but Dr. Fox's associate skillfully adjusts the controls. With one adjustment, the picture becomes perfectly sharp. Suddenly, the movement on screen halts. Complete silence fills the laboratory. This solitary figure, frozen within a sea of saluting Germans, challenges everything this newsreel was intended to represent. Who was this courageous individual, and what unshakable inner conviction prevented him from saluting during such a crucial moment in Nazi Germany's ascension, when defiance could have meant death? The footage continues, but for the researchers, this has transformed beyond routine archival duties. They recognize that behind this suspended moment lies an entire untold narrative. Nobody present realizes that a 90-year-old mystery is about to emerge, a secret that could revolutionize their understanding of loyalty, bravery, and the remarkable impact of a single act of resistance. Dr. Hannah Vogt, a historian who recently celebrated her 40th birthday, has committed her entire career to revealing the lesser-known, frequently hidden truths of the Nazi period. She isn't interested in sensationalizing or revising history for dramatic effect. Her genuine and profound dedication involves giving voice to those who have been unjustly forgotten, whose stories have been erased or overlooked. Standing nearby is Jens Meyer, a young yet already accomplished researcher specializing in complex and meticulous film restoration work. His deep fascination with archival materials was inherited from his grandfather, who similarly devoted himself to preserving historical records. When he and Dr. Vogt were assigned the responsibility of maintaining film footage of Hitler's warships, it appeared to be an ordinary, unremarkable project among numerous routine tasks. However, from the instant their eyes settled on that lone figure who steadfastly refused to perform the Nazi greeting, both were struck by an electric surge of curiosity, an almost physical sensation of mystery demanding resolution. Determined to discover the truth behind this single, seemingly insignificant footage, Dr. Vogt and Meyer commenced their investigation by examining every millimeter, scrutinizing it meticulously. The videotape masterfully documents the proud and ostentatious unveiling of Hitler's new warship in a busy, crowded shipyard. Swastika banners wave ominously in the powerful wind, resembling giant ravens. Rows of officers in pristine uniforms stand at attention, their expressions showing silent devotion while throngs of Germans, seized with enthusiasm, gather around, praising the Reich's future magnificence. As they discuss the potential significance of their discovery, they notice something even more fascinating. In the left pocket of the same man's jacket appears a small rectangular card. Enlarging the image to maximum capacity, they can distinguish faint handwritten text, though it remains too unclear to decipher. This minute detail immediately becomes their most promising clue regarding why someone might carry a handwritten card on a day when any individuality could be perceived as defiance. Whether it was a permit, a confidential message, or some form of identification, from that moment forward, the researchers made solving this puzzle their personal mission, extending beyond their regular professional obligations. They tentatively designated the unknown male Subject X, determined to extract every possible fragment of evidence from that inconspicuous rectangle attached to his chest. The pressing question remained: who was he truly, and what risk did he face by not saluting Hitler's warship when such acknowledgement was virtually mandatory? The following morning, as the first sunbeams barely touched Berlin's spires, Hanna and Jens were already deep within the National Archives, whose corridors resembled a maze filled with long-forgotten mysteries. Their objective was locating documentation of that particular warship's launch. However, the 90 years that had elapsed since then had transformed the official records into a genuine jigsaw puzzle of fragments. Many files were irretrievably lost during massive bombing campaigns, others were seized by Allied forces after the war and removed from Germany, and some were never located at all, disappearing in history's chaos. They examined dozens of personal diary issues, newsletters, and official dispatches. The pair encountered obstacle after obstacle. Record indexes from the mid-1930s proved incomplete, as if someone had deliberately torn out crucial document pages that were misplaced under long-disbanded ministries, making their search even more laborious. In some instances, newly digitized scans were so faded that entire paragraphs became completely illegible, leaving only vague content suggestions. Worse still, many records directly or indirectly related to Hitler's warship remained blocked behind an impenetrable bureaucratic barrier. Access remained restricted by confidentiality regulations or due to undeciphered content. Even after many decades, archivists remained extremely cautious, fearing misidentifications or worse, sensationalized claims that would distort historical truth. Meanwhile, Hanna utilizes her extensive network to make a series of delicate phone calls to historians specializing in this period. Some show keen interest, intrigued by the unusual nature of the inquiry. Others caution that such isolated anomalies, like a lone man refusing to salute, often lead to dead ends without providing useful information. However, one retired professor, Dr. Ulrich Ball, shares a valuable insight that sometimes solitary acts of defiance genuinely occur. He adds that if Subject X did confront the crowd, his life could have been seriously endangered. Meanwhile, Jens wonders why Subject X didn't hide in shadows but openly refused to salute at such a massive public event. Perhaps it wasn't a premeditated act of protest. Maybe he froze from fear and realized too late that he was being filmed. Or perhaps he had personal reasons to resist that outweighed any fear of discovery. Late at night, when Berlin's sky had already turned dark, an unexpected message arrives in Hannah's email. The subject line reads like a spark of hope: potential lead on personnel. Inside is a cryptic message from an anonymous sender claiming to have inherited diaries from a relative who once worked at the shipyard. The diaries reportedly mention a laborer who refused to attend certain Nazi-sponsored events. The letter concludes with a phone number and one intriguing detail: he always carries a handwritten note in case he's questioned. The excitement is overwhelming. Hanna and Jens might have found the identical card mentioned in the diaries that was pinned to Subject X's pocket. They decide to contact the source immediately but with utmost discretion, as the assistance could be both genuine and a carefully laid trap to spread misinformation. Nevertheless, the opportunity to learn more about the person whose identity has become their obsession is too significant to ignore. To avoid detection, Hanna and Jens arrange to meet their anonymous informant, an elderly man, at a quiet, cozy cafe near the river. There, a gentleman named Marcus appears, holding a worn leather notebook. Evidence from long ago, he explains. My grandfather worked as a foreman in the very shipyard where the warship was launched during the filming. He kept extremely detailed diaries of his daily life, including comprehensive notes about his coworkers and their behavior. Over coffee, Marcus opens the diary, gently running his finger over the yellowed pages like a precious artifact. He points to a brief but significant passage where a man continues staying on the sidelines, regardless of pressure to conform. He won't raise his voice as crowds and formal speeches make him uncomfortable due to anxiety. He holds up a note pinned to his jacket, something explaining his reason for refusing. All three exchange wide-eyed looks, their faces expressing amazement and excitement. These lines perfectly, literally, and exactly match the videotape portion where a handwritten card was visible on Subject X's jacket. Hannah's pulse races with anticipation of solving the mystery. If this diary is authentic, it could definitively confirm Subject X's identity. Despite such promising leads, key details remain frustratingly absent. The passage consists of a short half-dozen sentences scribbled in hasty ink, as if the note was made quickly to avoid notice. They scrutinize other records covering the months surrounding the ship's launch, where the foreman occasionally mentions a quiet worker who rarely speaks and often avoids meetings and public events. One entry refers to rumors that a man lost a family member under suspicious circumstances, though it's unclear whether this suspicion involved official harassment or something more personal. Still, one phrase particularly stands out and raises questions about whether he possessed a moral code. Jens's mind races at incredible speed. Could this paper literally be some kind of credo or statement of conscience, a sort of silent manifesto? Or, less likely, an official medical exemption from Nazi greetings? Such exemptions were extremely rare, but sometimes granted to people with injuries or other special conditions. The diaries unfortunately don't provide a clear answer to this question. Nevertheless, the very idea that he carried a written waiver like a personal banner of defiance sends chills through them. Marcus, recognizing his findings' importance, willingly agrees to let them digitize these pages for more thorough and detailed analysis. He also shares old family stories his grandfather told him as a child, rumors of small but significant acts of defiance that never made headlines but quietly flickered like flames of hope in various communities. The master believed these unspoken, sometimes almost invisible yet determined actions were the true measure of courage. As they departed the cafe, Hannah and Jens felt the weight of the journals in their bag, as if the story itself resided within it. The puzzle pieces were gradually but steadily falling into place, revealing personal humanity alongside a grand historical moment. The question that had been consuming them was becoming increasingly persistent. Did Subject X face consequences for not honoring the salute? If so, what became of him? The deeper they delved into the narrative, the more the videotape resonated with them. This wasn't merely about one moment in time. It was about the incredible power of individual choices made against the all-consuming tide of collective fanaticism. Hannah reflected that sometimes the most significant discoveries in historical research come not from grandiose events that are already known, but from small, almost invisible acts that are like ripples in water, spreading through time and leaving their mark. The researchers were beginning to suspect that official archives, personal diaries, and even occasional letters intersected to clarify the situation and provide a definitive answer. With renewed determination, they intensified their search of the National Archives and local municipal records. Every night, they scrutinized their new findings against the records in Marcus's diary, and finally, they struck gold. They discovered a little-known personnel log buried deep in the archives. Among the hundreds of names, there was one entry labeled with a short but telling notation about receiving repeated warnings for failing to comply with national regulations at official events. The date of this entry matched suspiciously precisely with the approximate launch of Hitler's warship. Unfortunately, the name was only partially legible, just August something or other, blurred by water damage, as if time itself had erased some of the vital information. Hannah carefully examined the next page and found the following note: Dismissed 1936. Although this didn't provide a direct, irrefutable reason for the dismissal, the timing was suspiciously close to the day that very same videotape was taken. The reason for his dismissal could very well have been the refusal to give the salute that they witnessed. That wasn't 100% proof, no smoking gun, but it was enough for them to suspect that this August might be their mystery Subject X. The partial name they managed to decipher matched the entries in the diary that mentioned a man was fired for creating friction, wording that could conceal anything. Another vital detail emerged. He apparently lived near a small neighborhood in Hamburg, a place known for its shipbuilding workforce, which confirmed his connection to the shipyard. To finally verify this connection, Hannah checked local Hamburg records for 1937. She found a single reference to a man whose occupation was listed as a dock worker and whose margins bore an asterisk with an expired document notation. There was no mention of a spouse or children or subsequent employment, no other clues that might shed light on his future. With this incomplete but valuable evidence, Hannah and Jens realized they were on the verge of discovering Subject X's true identity. They couldn't help but feel a strange, contradictory mixture of excitement and deep fear. What if they found out that he had been stalked or imprisoned for this single but courageous act of defiance? What if he had changed his name to avoid suspicion, forever burying his story? No matter what they found, they had enough reason to suspect that the man who broke ranks among thousands of Germans saluting Hitler's warship did so consciously, out of conscience, and most likely paid a tremendously high price. There was only one last detail left. They needed final, irrefutable proof, something indisputable. A document linking Augustus to that fateful moment on the tape. Time was running fast, and the feeling of urgency was palpable. The 90-year gap between the warship's launching and today seemed like a gaping abyss filled with unsolved secrets. Yet the very possibility of shedding light on this quiet rebellion propelled them forward, energizing them with the thought of this courageous act of defiance. One late evening, when the sun was almost over the horizon, Hannah received a phone call from Marcus. His voice sounded out of breath as if he'd just run a marathon. "I found a note tucked into the back cover of the diary," he said excitedly. "You need to see this immediately." Within an hour, Hannah and Jens were sitting in Marcus's apartment. He carefully placed a single piece of paper on the table, yellowed by time, almost crumbling. The handwriting was faded but legible, and each word was like a hammer blow to their minds. "I won't raise my hand for a cause I don't believe in. If they ask me why, I'll show them this. My conscience is the only authority I recognize." Beneath these powerful prophetic lines, it was signed August Landmesser. The writing style precisely corresponded to the era. Branchy, slightly slanted, elegant, and decisive at the same time. Hannah's heart raced with anticipation of something great as the trio realized the incredible significance of the find. Jens could barely contain his astonishment at the discovery of the name. They immediately embarked on a thorough investigation into his entire history, methodically piecing together fragments of his life. What they uncovered was a story that was both tragic and incredibly inspiring. Landmesser's life, once buried beneath decades of silence, was beginning to resurface in the form of painful but surprisingly powerful fragments. He was not always a resistance fighter. Like many Germans of the time he joined the Nazi Party in 1933, probably carried away and blinded by the promise of a better Germany that was in the air at the time. But that all changed when he fell in love with Irma Eckler, a Jewish woman, and that love became his red line, a boundary he could not and would not cross. In 1935, he proposed to her. Their engagement became publicized, and he was immediately expelled from the party. Nevertheless, they stayed together, holding tightly to each other. When their marriage application was rejected under the newly enacted Nuremberg laws, they defied the system and still stayed together, welcoming their first daughter, Ingrid, a year later, just a few months before that moment was captured on videotape. Augustus stood in a sea of raised hands and consciously chose not to move. Now the footage had taken on a much deeper meaning. This was not a spontaneous act of desperation or fear. It was a deliberate, decisive choice. It was an act of love. It was an act of defiance. In 1937, August made a desperate attempt to escape from Germany with Irma and their daughter. But they were caught. August was arrested and charged with violating the regime's racial laws. He was released a year later under strict orders never to see Irma again. But driven by love, he broke that order, chose love again, and paid an incredibly high price. That same year, he was sentenced to almost 3 years in a concentration camp. He never saw Irma or his daughters again. Irma was pregnant with their second child when she was arrested shortly thereafter. She gave birth in captivity and then disappeared into the merciless machine of the regime. Records suggest that she was transferred to various institutions before being sent to an extermination center in 1942. August Landmesser's final fate came in 1944 when he was drafted into a punitive military unit. He died in battle somewhere in the chaos of war, his death lost in the maelstrom of millions of others. What survives and remains for us is that one unforgettable shot of one man crossing his arms, refusing to salute. A choice made in public against everything and everyone around him, an act of solitary courage. Now, almost a century later, two explorers stand in silent awe of what it means. In an era defined by total conformity, someone managed to remain himself. In the days following their discovery, Hannah and Jens worked feverishly with unprecedented enthusiasm to compile a detailed report that tied together the timeline. Excerpts from the diaries, the personnel records, and the tragic but inspiring story of August. They presented their report to the Archives Committee behind the film's digitization, not to create a sensation, but to honor a quiet but powerful act of defiance by a man who dared to say no when the vast majority chose compliance. The committee, overwhelmed by the evidence presented, agreed to preserve this discovery and include it in the official historical record. That night was the last time Hannah returned to the newsreel, alone in the lab, watching the launching of Hitler's warship with the proud cheers of the crowd and perfectly orchestrated salutes. Her gaze once again rested on August Landmesser. Despite the grainy film, she almost felt like she could see his eyes again, eyes filled with the quiet, unwavering determination. August Landmesser's simple act of defiance, to stand still while thousands saluted, reminds us that even in the darkest moments of history, individual conscience can shine a bright light, encouraging us to take the risk of standing up for our principles when everyone around us has already given up. The story of August Landmesser serves as a powerful testament to the strength of human conviction and the importance of individual moral courage in the face of overwhelming pressure to conform. His refusal to participate in the Nazi salute, captured in that single frame of film, has become a symbol of resistance that continues to inspire people around the world nearly a century later. Through the dedicated work of researchers like Hannah and Jens, stories like August's are preserved and given the recognition they deserve. These seemingly small acts of defiance, when viewed through the lens of history, reveal themselves to be moments of profound significance that remind us of our own capacity for moral courage in difficult times. The impact of their discovery extended far beyond the confines of the archive laboratory. Hannah and Jens realized they had uncovered more than just a historical footnote. They had revealed a profound lesson about human dignity and moral courage that transcended time itself. The grainy black and white footage had transformed from a routine archival film into a powerful symbol of individual resistance against tyranny. As word of their findings spread through academic circles, historians and researchers from around the world began reaching out. The story of August Landmesser resonated with people across different cultures and generations, proving that acts of conscience speak a universal language. Museums requested copies of the footage for educational exhibitions, while schools incorporated the story into their curricula as a teaching tool about the importance of standing up for one's beliefs. The significance of August's story lay not just in what he did, but in what he represented. In an era when millions of people were swept up in the tide of fascism, when fear and propaganda convinced ordinary citizens to participate in or remain silent about unspeakable atrocities, one man chose differently. His crossed arms became a symbol of hope, proof that even in the darkest times, individual conscience could prevail over collective madness. Hannah often reflected on the broader implications of their research. The meticulous process of uncovering August's identity had taught her that history is not just about the grand narratives of wars and leaders, but about the countless individual choices that ordinary people make in extraordinary circumstances. Every person who resisted, who helped a neighbor, who refused to participate in hatred, these were the true heroes whose stories deserved to be told and remembered. The technology that enabled their discovery also highlighted how much of history remains hidden in archives around the world. Countless reels of film, boxes of documents, and collections of personal papers contain stories waiting to be uncovered. Hannah and Jens became advocates for increased funding for digitization projects, understanding that preserving these materials was not just about the past, but about providing lessons for future generations. Marcus's willingness to share his grandfather's diary had been crucial to their success, demonstrating the importance of family stories and personal archives. Many significant historical discoveries begin with someone finding old papers in an attic or basement, recognizing their potential value and bringing them to the attention of researchers. The collaboration between professional historians and ordinary citizens who preserve family memories creates a more complete picture of the past. The story also raised important questions about how we remember and commemorate acts of resistance. August Landmesser's defiance was captured accidentally by a camera operator filming a Nazi propaganda event. How many other acts of courage went unrecorded, their perpetrators dying unknown and unremembered? The researchers understood that for every August Landmesser whose story was preserved on film, there were countless others whose resistance left no trace in the historical record. As they compiled their final research report, Hannah and Jens were careful to present August's story with appropriate context. They emphasized that his act of defiance, while admirable, came at an enormous personal cost. His love for Irma Eckler had transformed him from a Nazi Party member into a victim of the regime's racial laws. Their research revealed the human complexity behind historical events, how personal relationships and individual experiences could lead people to change their beliefs and take enormous risks. The documentation of August's life also provided insights into the mechanics of Nazi persecution. The progression from party membership to expulsion, from warnings to imprisonment, from separation to death, illustrated how the regime systematically destroyed those who opposed it or violated its racial ideology. August's story was both unique and representative of thousands of similar tragedies that unfolded across Nazi-controlled Europe. Educational institutions around the world began incorporating the story into their Holocaust education programs. The image of August standing with his arms crossed became as iconic as other symbols of resistance from that era. Teachers found that students connected powerfully with the story because it demonstrated how one person's choices could matter, even in the face of overwhelming evil. The research also contributed to ongoing discussions about bystander behavior and moral responsibility. Psychologists and sociologists studied the case as an example of how individuals can resist social pressure and maintain their moral integrity even when surrounded by conformity. August's story became part of academic discourse about the factors that enable some people to act courageously while others remain passive. Years after their initial discovery, Hannah and Jens continued to receive messages from people around the world who had been inspired by August's story. Some shared their own family histories of resistance, while others described how the story had influenced their own decisions to speak out against injustice in their communities. The ripple effects of their research demonstrated how historical knowledge could inspire contemporary action. The preservation of August Landmesser's story also highlighted the ongoing importance of defending democratic values and human rights. In an era of rising authoritarianism and political polarization, his example served as a reminder that ordinary citizens have both the power and the responsibility to resist when governments violate fundamental human dignity. His crossed arms became a symbol not just of historical resistance, but of timeless moral courage. The technological tools that enabled Hannah and Jens to enhance the old footage and cross-reference historical documents represented the democratization of historical research. Digital archives, online databases, and image enhancement software made it possible for researchers to make connections that would have been impossible in earlier eras. Their work demonstrated how technology could serve the cause of historical truth and justice. As their research project concluded, Hannah and Jens reflected on the lessons they had learned. The process of uncovering August's story had been painstaking and sometimes frustrating, requiring persistence, creativity, and collaboration with multiple sources. But the result? Bringing recognition to a forgotten hero and preserving his story for future generations made every effort worthwhile. The story of August Landmesser ultimately transcended its historical context to become a universal tale about the power of individual conscience. In a world where people often feel powerless against large forces of injustice or oppression, his example demonstrated that one person's refusal to participate in evil could have lasting significance. His moment of defiance, captured accidentally on film, became a beacon of hope that continues to inspire people to this day. The researchers' work ensured that August Landmesser would be remembered not as a victim, but as someone who chose love over hatred, conscience over conformity, and truth over propaganda. His story serves as a permanent reminder that in every generation, individuals must choose whether to stand with the crowd or stand for their principles, and that sometimes standing alone is the most powerful stand of all. Thank you for staying with us throughout this remarkable journey of historical discovery. If you believe our work is essential in preserving and sharing these important stories, please support it by engaging with our content and helping us reach others who need to hear these lessons from the past.